This podcast was recorded on April 5th, 2021. We have broken our extended conversation on the rich and important topic of race into 3 parts.
Play, think, listen, learn. Play,
The plan you're looking for is here.
Listen.
One moment. Let me get my phone set. I'm feeling good.
Hi, we're here and we're a little weird.
Think,
Can
listen,
I just say how
learn,
happy that
play,
makes my heart?
Think, listen, learn.
Welcome to episode 3 of the CCR Provider Support Podcast series, brought to you by the Couch Coaching Quintet. From caricature left to caricature right, I'm Mike.
This is Adrienne.
I'm Marie.
I'm Viv. Hi.
And I'm Chris.
I didn't see the picture. Where was I? I was on vacation. Sorry.
All right, Quintet members, we barely even begun. We haven't even announced our topic and we're already off course. Okay, our topic today is race. And where do we even begin? With Theodore Geisel, aka Dr. Seuss, of course. He died 30 years ago. All the same, he has been in the news. His estate, Dr. Seuss Enterprises, announced on March 2nd that it will stop publishing and licensing 6 Dr. Seuss books because of their racist and insensitive imagery. Dr. Seuss wrote more than 60 children's books, so that still leaves a whole lot of Dr. Seuss out there, including all of his really famous and popular titles. No matter, some commentators and Dr. Seuss enthusiasts were enraged, and the 6 decommissioned books shot to the top of Amazon's bestseller list. Fellow Couch Coaching Quintet members, what do you make of this hullabaloo?
I don't know. I grew up reading various Dr. Seuss books, and the ones that the Enterprise pulled, I'm not even sure that I'm familiar with most of those. But Green Eggs and Ham.
What? You haven't read Scrambled Egg Super?
No, but I do like, and I love Green Eggs and Ham, but despite that being one of my favorite books growing up, I also applaud the foundation for not just apologizing or doing kind of that performative, like, well, if we offended you, but I applaud them for taking a stance and recognizing that the books are problematic and the imagery is problematic and pulling them from production.
To me, it shows growth when a person or foundation can self-assess and say, I recognize this as wrong. You don't know what you don't know until you know. So there's things that they didn't realize potentially were harmful when these books were originally made. They lived in this mindset of, no, this is appropriate artistry. And then they found out, they figured it out, and they realized, no, these images are actually harmful to our potential readers, especially the young children. So they made the decision to do this. And I think that that's great. That's great that they can self-assess and own the past issues and try to rectify it.
Dr. Seuss has great memories for me, only because I remember my very, very first book my mom bought me was The Cat in the Hat. And it was like this very cherished book that I even still have, and it's still hanging around here. And there's a lot of history in these books. And I will say, I hate to see history taken away, because history gives us room to talk, room to think, room to learn by. And when we get rid of it, how do you teach what's already happened? How do you move forward, or how can you share back that had happened way back, and tell kids that, look at this. Is this okay? There's a lot of stuff going on out there. I get it. but it's all part of this cancel culture, and I'm just not understanding how much can we keep canceling without understanding where we've been and how far we can go. Okay.
I think that it's important to not just cancel things. I think it's important to have dialogue along with it. So to recognize and say these specific books, these specific images, and this is why we've taken it away. I think that is the piece that's very important, is the conversation around it, not just to say, okay, it's bad, so it's going away. Well, why is it bad? Like, why did you choose to get rid of it? I think that's the important thing. Somebody saying, well, my feelings are hurt, so this just needs to be done and over right now. That's not always the appropriate. There are times that is the appropriate response, but I don't think that that's 100% the right answer all the time. I think that there are times we need to sit in maybe the uncomfortableness and talk about why we're uncomfortable or what makes it inappropriate, so then it can still be a teachable moment.
Does that mean that you have to take those books off the shelf?
I say yes. I say yes, but why? I'm doing this action and this is why. So I'm going to remove these books, but this is why. I'm going to take these books away from my library or my family, whatever, because I don't want my work, home, whatever environment to be a place where harmful images reside.
And I agree too. There's something about nostalgia that sometimes gets in our way, where it is something from our history and from our past, and it might have been beloved. But as we learn more, to me, I'm not seeing this as cancel culture. Dr. Seuss isn't being thrown out completely. He's not appearing on banned book lists that I'm aware of. But what we're saying is what I feel like they're saying is these particular works of his are in today's society, and really in the time that he wrote them and drew them, they weren't okay. But in today's society, they're not okay images. And I hear what you're saying about what I view as critical thinking. If adults sit down with kids and really have that critical conversation around, just as you said, let's take a look at these and have a conversation. My biggest concern would be those books being in circulation and available without that critical conversation, and what messages that shows to children who, Black, Indigenous, children of color, and adults. What messages does it give without that conversation?
Something that I think about is, these books are being removed because of the hurtful images to Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And so I'm okay with them removing these books specifically. I also hear Viv when she says that, it's a teaching moment, and we should maybe not necessarily have to remove them, but use them as a teaching moment. But then I think about things that are happening like in the East Coast and the South, where they're taking down statues of like slave owners and plantation owners and stuff like that. Yeah. So Viv, where would you stand on something like that?
Well, okay, first of all, I want to say, I do not believe in the Confederate flag, and I don't believe in racism at all. Okay, I want to make that really clear. Again, it's a teaching. If we hide everything and take everything, where can we learn from? I'm not saying that it's good. But I'm also saying that there's history, and can there be something on those statues per se that maybe can there be an explanation included in that display that would talk and teach about the anti-bias or anti-racism work that should be done.
And I totally get what you're saying, Viv, because at the same time, I feel like, I think for me, the line is, you know, if we remove these things, then the future generations don't have access to it no more. Right. And so, like you're saying, they don't get to learn about these things because these things are no longer in circulation. It's no longer, the opportunity to have a teachable moment has passed. Right. Then I think about, like, you know, for those people that it did offend, as they get older and they see that it's no longer in circulation and no longer a teachable moment, is there now, I don't know if these are the right words, but is there now ignorance to the subject of, you know, like, this is what's happening. This is what was happening before. It's no longer happening now. So do we not talk about it, or I don't know. So yeah, I'm kind of,
you know, history repeats itself. We all know that. So unfortunately, you know, bad things repeat. So can we learn from that? Can we say, oh yeah, there's that statue, then we know that, okay, is it similar to what we're feeling now? Or, you know, in years, I don't know. You know,
I don't know. And oftentimes when we erect as a society, when like statues or public displays of art honor a person, you know, those who are, you know, whether the person's living or not, those who erected those statues or those pieces of art supported that person and that person's ideals. And particularly when it comes to the history of Blacks in this country and enslavement, those ideals live today. And to me, you know, a statue of Robert Lee staying up is still honoring and promoting of his views and kind of putting him literally on a pedestal to look up at. There's not that educational. I think that it would be great if there was that education piece, but the reality is that there isn't. And it's an exception to the rule if there's that education piece. You know, when I think about, you know, when I see those statues, when I think about children in my family who are learning in school buildings that are named for people who actively campaigned against them being in those school buildings, it's hard and it's hurtful and it's painful.
I have a unique experience. When I lived in Russia, there was what they called the historical relic garden. I don't know. I think that's what it was called. But anyway, in downtown Moscow, there is a statue garden. And when they took down the statues of Stalin, they were like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with all these statues and all these other relics of the USSR and communism and things? So they kind of just dumped them, but not it was kind of almost unceremoniously. And it's in this garden. And so it was interesting. This is a country that renamed cities. Leningrad, Stalingrad, those are not the names of those towns anymore. They have renamed cities. They have renamed various buildings and things like that because they don't want to associate with that. But they have these statues and they have them in a space that the public can go to. It's a public park that you can just walk around, but they're not maintained. They're not, Adrienne, you said, like up on a pedestal. So they tied chains around them and drug Stalin to the ground. So these are there where they don't have the pedestal. They're chipped, they're broken because they just dragged him down and basically took him to this location. And so the relics are still there, but they're not the same. And so, yes, they're still there, and they have these placards that say things like, this was once in downtown Moscow, or this was once in front of X building. And then it also says, and it was removed this day, and things like that. And so the history of that piece is there on these placards, and they're not in the same way. They're not still up on the podiums. They're not clean. A lot of them had like moss and plants like growing over it. And it was kind of the symbolism of life can still spring forth from this darkness, this dark time, this ugly history. But look, there's like flowers that can come out of it. And so I've seen where they've taken those statues in a different country and not gotten rid of them fully, but tried to use them in a teachable moment or keep them around as, hey, this is us. We did this thing. We allowed these things to happen within our country, but that's not who we are now. And this is the growth. This is the growth we've come from this. Look, now we have these beautiful tall trees, these big, thick bushes, but underneath them still is that yuckiness. It's still these relics of the USSR times and some of those things that they're not proud of. So yeah, so that it's preserved, but it's in a teachable way. And if we could somehow figure out that's that thing, like, no, we're not going to have Robert E. Lee on the horse right in front of the Capitol building on this big bronze, whatever. No, we're going to tie the chains like around him, drag him down, and it's going to be chipped. It's going to be broken. It's going to be ugly. And that's it. We're going to show that it's not this beautiful thing anymore. No, it is this piece of our broken past. And I think that's how we handle it. We don't just leave it there in front of the Capitol building and call it a day.
Wow, I really like that, Maria. I wouldn't have known that otherwise, but I think that's a great example of how you can do it, right? The way that you can still possibly have a statue up, but say, hey, this was back in the day and we're better and we're reformed now. And this is what we're doing, but we're keeping this as a memento of, yes, we know our history is muddied, but this is a reminder that we can still move forward and have greener pastures.
I think that statues present a different sort of physical, visceral, literal challenge than books. And I'd like to offer up an alternative history that began on March 2nd. Let us imagine that on March 2nd, Dr. Seuss Enterprises had announced that they were going to stop publishing and licensing the 6 most famous and best-selling Dr. Seuss books instead of 6 of the least famous and worst-selling Dr. Seuss books ever. Well, 5 of the 6 are in that list. They had said that, for instance, The Cat in the Hat and Green Eggs and Ham were out the window. They were going to no longer license them. They'd no longer be published. I think in that case, there would be an understandable response. Wait, you're taking away these icons of millions of people's childhoods. That's not what occurred on March 2nd. Second alternative history. Let us imagine that on March 2nd, Dr. Seuss Enterprises had issued a brief statement, essentially a business statement saying, effective such and such a date, we are going to discontinue licensing and selling of these 6 books, the same 6 books they picked, not because they have morally offensive imagery, but because nobody's buying the darn things. Books go out of print all the time in the United States. More than 600,000 new books are printed in the United States each year, in addition to books that are reissued in new editions. That's a lot of different titles. Most of those titles don't stay in circulation very long. There simply isn't enough appetite for them. We can argue that this or that book by a particular author deserved to have a different fate, but it's a fact of business and publishing life and the attention spans of overwhelmed Americans that most books go out of print. And I am willing to wager that if on March 2nd, Dr. Seuss Enterprises had announced that they were discontinuing publishing these 6 books, and they had not given as the stated reason that the books have racist imagery, but instead had given as the stated reason nobody wants to buy them, you wouldn't have heard a peep about it from anybody. We wouldn't even know that announcement had been made. But as soon as they said that the reason that they were discontinuing them was because of racist and offensive imagery. Then all of a sudden, you have all these people, I'm willing to wager most of them white, all of these people suddenly saying, oh my God, we've got to go buy these books on Amazon. How dare you cancel these books? The objection was not to the fact that the books were going to go out of circulation. The objection was solely to the fact that the books were going to go out of circulation because they have racist and offensive imagery. And if that is not in and of itself a demonstration of racist attitudes and behavior, I don't know what is. So my feeling is that the controversy certainly demonstrates, as if we needed any further proof, when racism in the United States has been in plain sight since before the country became a country. If we needed any further proof, this is, example number 5,643 or whatever, that we still have racism alive and well in the United States. And I'm not willing to accept that the response to the announcement was anything other than white people saying, we have the right to be racist, don't you dare tell us that we don't, and trying to cloak it as having something to do with free speech when in fact I don't believe that's what it was.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 on our conversation about race. Please join us in 2 weeks when we continue our conversation.